Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. Thanks for joining this instance of the Antrea community meeting. Uh, for this meeting, we have two topics, both related to Flow Exporter and Flow Aggregator. We'll have two presentations. The first one from Andrew about supporting multiple destinations for Flow Exporter. This is about having the potential of sending flows to different flow aggregators at the same time. And then we'll have another presentation from Peter about support for external flow monitoring. This is an addition to Flow Exporter to capture ingress flows from external sources, which so far were not supported. The presentations for today are recorded because Peter and Andrew cannot be physically present with us due to time zone differences. And if the audience, should the audience have any questions, comment, or observation, Yang and myself are here to address any question that you might have. So let's get started with Andrew's work regarding Flow Exporter destination. I'm going to share my screen and slideshow mode, and there it is. So a Flow Exporter destination is a new CRD that has been defined to specify where flow records should be forwarded to. And it's a kind of a very simple CRD. On the right, you can see an example. It's just a matter of specifying the address of the flow aggregator, destination flow aggregator, similar in the similar way as we do today in the Antrea configuration. Parameters like flow export timeout seconds and idle flow export timeout. Then you can select the protocol, which must be one of those two values, either gRPC or IPFix. And if you select IPFix, of course, you also have a choice of TCP, TLS, or UDP transport selection. And then you can specify a filter. At the moment, the only filter which is supported is a filter on protocol, which you can use to specify what kind of flows will need to be sent to this aggregator. So that's the definition of the CRD. The required file fields, of course, are the protocol to be used, the address of the flow aggregator, and if in case of IPFix, the specification of the transport is mandatory. These are the optional parameters, which are like the timeouts and the filter. Then a note on backwards compatibility. The flow exporter configuration, as it's done today in the Antrea config map, it's still going to be supported. So this means that you can still specify your destination aggregator using the Antrea config map. And this sort of creates a sort of default destination, if you want to look in this way. That's sort of the default destination, the one that you specify the Antrea config map. But that one now becomes optional. So if users don't specify anything in the Antrea agent config map, they can just specify all the destinations using this new CRD. And these keys, which are already existing in the Antrea config map, are still supported, and they will be used exclusively for the configuration of the exporter in the Antrea config map. They will not be used, for instance, as a default settings for the destinations that we create through the CRDs. So let's say that the values that you specify in the config map are just for those default settings for that destination configuration, and they have no impact on the destinations that you configure through the CRD. It is, however, there is a possibility that you specify the same destination both here in the Antrea config map as a destination CRD. In this case, it's user responsibility to verify that you are not sending flows to the same destination in two ways, through the Antrea config map and through a destination CRD. There is, however, something which is still missing, and it's TLS support for additional flow aggregators. This is because the Antrea agent currently looks for CA certificate and client certificate in flow aggregator namespace using two predefined values for the secret and for the client secret and for the CA certificate. So this means that it's not possible for the Antrea agent to use TLS and GRP or gRPC to connect to two distinct flow aggregators. So at the moment, all the additional flow aggregators that we define through destination CRDs must connect with either TCP or UDP. We needed to fix this, and in order to rectify this, we needed to make a change to allow users to specify which client certificate to use for the flow aggregator. And the flow aggregator should also specify where these certificates live, so that each flow aggregator can have its own client and CA certificate. But I think now it's time for the demo. In this demo, we'll have 3 flow aggregators, one with TLS enabled, only one as we just discussed, and one with TCP in the same namespace. We are going to create the following flow exporter destinations. One using gRPC connection, another one using IPFix TCP to flow aggregator 1, and the second one using TCP to flow aggregator 2, and will filter only TCP flows. We will then delete these first flow exporter destination and enable the one in the Antrea config map. But in any case, it's much better if we go straight to the demo and see this live. Just give me a second to reshare the screen with sound. In the meantime, before the demo, is there any question? All right, so now I'm trying to reshare with sound. If you don't hear sound, please let me know.
Hey everyone, I'm Andrew, and in this demo I'll be showcasing the new Flow Exporter destination feature. Currently, the Flow Exporter can only be configured through your Antrea agent's config map. So with the Flow Exporter destination, you can now dynamically manage your exporters without needing to modify that config map or restarting your agents. So let's take a look. So here I have a cluster already deployed with my changes. You'll see I have 2 Nginx pods, which I'll be hitting to generate some traffic. And you'll see also 3 flow aggregators deployed. One of them, this one specifically, is running with TLS enabled. These other 2 are only going to accept TCP connections. So the reason that these 2 are not using TLS is because today the flow exporter in the agent looks for hard-coded namespaces and secrets and config maps from the flow aggregator to get this TLS configuration, like the certificates and whatnot. So until we get that fixed, the only thing we can support is one flow aggregator, call it flow aggregator, using TLS, and everything else would have to run through either TCP or UDP. But aside from that limitation, we can still kind of see how this flow exporter destination will work. So let's take a look at some examples of what's currently in the logs of these aggregators. Right now, that should be nothing because we haven't actually deployed any destinations, flow exporter destinations. So let's begin with a first destination. So let's do a cat of our destinations, aggregator 0. So this is the first flow exporter destination that I'm going to deploy. This is going to run over gRPC just to see that, hey, gRPC still works. And this is the flow aggregator that does support it. So let's take a look at -f on our destinations on aggregator 0. If we just kind of go back here and take a look at these logs, we should start seeing connections come in soon. And there we are. So connections are starting to come in. We see a bunch of like TCP connections going between like the flow aggregators. Let's do a quick curl on the service 1, and let's do a curl on service 2. So over here we should now start seeing, I'm going to just scroll here a little bit, you'll see some TCP connections from our toolbox pod hitting the Nginx 1, and there should be another one over here for TCP connection from Toolbox hitting Nginx 2, which is the two that I was connecting with earlier. So perfect. Now that we see some flows coming in, let's take a look at what the other flow aggregators are storing. In here, hopefully still nothing, right? And same with the second aggregator, because no flow should be going to these flow aggregators without someone saying, I want flows being sent there. So let's create 2 more flow exporter destinations. I'll just get this aggregator 1. So let's apply this. While it deploys, I can kind of go over what is happening on this one. Aggregator 1. So in this one, we are going to be connecting over IPFix over TCP to the flow aggregator 1. And we actually have a second one over here, which I will show you what it looks like. It is very similar. This target or destination with this one is the flow aggregator 2 running over TCP. However, it does add an additional filter over for TCP connections only. So let's take a look at what these logs look like for aggregator 1. So aggregator 1 has some flows coming in. Let's generate some more with let's generate some more flows over here. Curl on service 1, and let's do a curl on service 2. Now, yeah, let's do vertical. That way I can kind of see it up here. Perfect. So over here we see some TCP connections. Oops, not that one. Right over here. So we see a TCP connection to Nginx 2, and there should be another one for Nginx 1 just slightly higher up over here. Nginx 2 and Nginx 1 is right over here. So here are the 2 flows that we just generated, and you can see that they're kind of flowing in. So that is with aggregator 1. Let's take a look at aggregator 2. Same thing should be kind of here. I am also using tail, so you're not going to see it. It has kind of scrolled off my screen. Let's just create some more traffic. No problem. Connection 1, connection 2. So here's Nginx 1. We see Nginx 1 TCP connection, and then here's Nginx 2. Right here. Here's Nginx 2. Okay, cool. So we see all these flows coming in. Everything's good in this case. So you might be wondering, but what about that flow exporter configuration in the config map? So to maintain backwards compatibility, we still support it. And here's how it's going to work. The flow exporter enable key in the config map is going to help determine whether the old config map based configuration is used. So let's take a look at what that looks like for a second. Get config map in cube system, and this one is the Antrea config. Let's get our YAML, and we'll take a look at the data. So over here, we'll now see, let's go a little bit higher. Here's the flow exporter section. So right now the enable is false. So when you enable this to true, the expectation is that things like the flow collector address, the active flow export timeout, the idle flow timeout, and the protocol filters, these 4 fields are going to generate you a static flow exporter destination that's going to run alongside flow exporter destinations. So let's see what happens when we delete a destination pointing to the TLS enabled flow aggregator, and then we'll turn this on and see what happens. So get flow exporter destinations. So we see all these ones running. Delete flow exporter destination aggregator. So in this case, we actually should stop seeing flows come into this one. And flow should still continue to come in to all the other ones. Right? So we can say, yeah, I think this guy has stopped. No one's sending any more flows over there. So let's enable that static destination through the config map. So just using a little demo magic. Just using YQ, what I'm going to do is I'm going to update it to say flow exporter enable to true. And then very soon after that, we should start seeing flows come into this flow aggregator at the top. Yes, after I restart my agent, because I have just modified the config map. And that was silly of me. I had to stop and pause there for a second to think, why is it not working? So just waiting for the Antrea agent to come back up. Everything is up. And while we do this, let's do some curls, generate some traffic. And let's see what happens. And there we are. Traffic is showing up over here at the top for TCP to Nginx 1 and TCP for toolbox to Nginx 2. All right, so now that the agents have restarted, we can see the flows are flowing again. So let's kind of go back a little bit. I do want to show a bit of, hey, what happens when you modify a destination on the fly. So we'll take a look at this flow aggregator 2, where it's being targeted by flow exporter destination of destination 2. So this one is saying I want to filter on only TCP connections. And that is exactly what is happening. It's only getting TCP connections. However, we should be able to update it so that it reports both TCP and UDP connections. So let's do a quick edit. And I still have the -o YAML. I hope that doesn't mess it up. But here I'm going to make it to actually just do just UDP by itself. So we'll do a get. We see that the protocol is now UDP. Let's go and clear out this over there. And then let's do some curls. And from here, we should see a little bit of things coming in, and it should only be UDP. And nothing for the toolbox connecting to Nginx over TCP at all. So everything here is just UDP. All right, and there we have it. Both the config map based exporter and the flow exporter destination feature working together. Thank you for watching.
Okay, and first demo for today is done. So before we move to the next topic, which is monitoring for external pod flows, do you have any question or comment on this work? I'll wait for a few more seconds in case you're thinking. And I think we can conclude that there is no question. In any case, Andrew's PR for supporting these multiple destinations for Flow Exporter is in review. So it will be great also getting your reviews on the actual code that implements this. Now let's move to Peter's work. This is another PR which is already in review. It's for the purpose is supporting external to pod flows in the aggregator in the flow exporter. I believe that you know that at the moment the exporter monitors pod to pod traffic and service to pod traffic, but as it was reported in issue 5706, external flows are not collected, or at least they are collected but in an inconsistent way. So what Peter is doing here is proposing the changing the behavior to monitor, in any case, external to pod connections, making sure that at these external connections are tagged with the relevant metadata. So for instance, if you try to get to a node port, to a service to a node port, the service metadata are added to the flow in the same way that we do for service to pod flows. Peter here is also reporting, giving an instructions about how to build the code with these changes and how to showcase the features. But let's say that it's probably easier if we go straight forward into his demo. The only thing that I want to mention before the demo is that at the moment we are supporting traffic to node port and node port local in kube proxy mode. Uh, in the roadmap, we still have to support Antrea proxy all mode. This is because the flows that we need to capture from contract are slightly different in proxy all mode, and that's why it will need some changes. For now, we are supporting Q proxy mode, where let's say that the external flows, the one reaching into from the external client, are in contract table 0. Another investigation that we need, an investigation that we need to do to see if we need some enhancement in this feature is concerning external load balancers that might integrate with Antrea. Let's say that most of the use cases for external load balancers still fall back in the case in the node port case. So where basically a service is exposed as a port on the Kubernetes node, but we want to check if there are some other cases where external load balancers might use a different mechanism, and it might require us to monitor traffic in a different way. So at the moment, this PR is still in draft because we have some additional verifications to do, and also Peter is still working on some flakiness with end-to-end tests. But let's say that the feature seems to be fairly solid, and you can now go and see a demo for this feature here. And let me make this one full screen. And I think that I need to reshare the screen. Yes, probably I need. So let me do that. Okay. If you cannot see the screen, or if you cannot see hear the audio, please let me know. And let's get started with this other
Hello,
demo.
my name is Peter, and I'm here to demonstrate the feature I've been working on that's available in the PR 7483, which is to support external to pod flows in the flow exporter. So a bit of an outline for my discussion, for this discussion. I'm going to give you a bit of a background of what the flow exporter does and the aggregator, describe what the current behavior is, and then the proposed behavior from this PR. I'm going to give you steps to reproduce the environment and the demo. And then lastly, I'll close off with a couple items that are on the roadmap but aren't delivered in this PR. So a bit of background of the flow exporter and aggregator. The flow exporter is a feature behind a feature flag. And when this is turned on, connections are monitored and they're exported. The flow aggregator is an optional thing you can deploy that can deduplicate flows, combine similar flows, and populate metadata like the Kate's pod and services. So the current behavior is that if you have a pod and you access it from outside the cluster, like say you have a web server, you do a GET request to it. The original source IP is NATed, and the source IP won't be the IP of the person reaching the pod, but instead it would have the gateway IP. So these flows aren't exported because they're not quite useful. In this PR, I'm proposing to include these flows by doing a bit of correlation. So I've added a bit of extra data to be exported, and that data can be used by the flow aggregator to create this connection that retains a source IP. And the final outcome is that the flows that get sent by the flow aggregator are contain both the source IP of the person who reached the pod and also the destination IP is.
I don't know if there is a problem with the video or a problem with my internet connection. Can you still hear me?
Yes.
I can still hear you, but the video paused. It was
Okay.
showing loading.
Yeah, that's some issue with this video. I don't know what's going on. Let me try and reload. Maybe we got lucky. If we load it, it works.
Hello, my name is Peter, and
Let's go
here to
back to the place
demonstrate
where we were.
the feature I've been working on. That's
Okay.
the destination IP is correctly the pod IP. So I'm going to go into a little demo of how I can kind of showcase this behavior. So first, I'm going to spin up a kind cluster. Next, I'm going to make and load the images from my branch. Alright, now I'm going to deploy Antrea with a couple of modifications. I'm going to enable the flow exporter because it is behind a feature flag. I'm also going to deploy the flow aggregator with the flow logger enabled. This allows me to see the flows that were exported that are just on a file on the flow aggregator. I've also decreased the timeouts so that we can see these flows a little bit faster. All right. The last step for setting up this demo is creating a namespace, pod, and a service. All right, so I'm going to create a connection to the pod and expect to see that that connection information is logged to that file. First, I'll connect to the pod. Next, I'm going to jump onto the flow aggregator pod. And this might take a second, but I'm going to take a look at the flow log, and I expect to see my Nginx flow there. All right, and there it is. So this IP here is the IP of my VM that I'm doing this demo off of, and this IP is the IP of the Nginx pod I just created. It also has the service information and some of the Kubernetes metadata, like the pod name, namespace, and node. One thing I also wanted to show was doing this with node port local enabled. So with this snippet here, I'm going to update the config map to enable node port local and then kill the pods to have that take effect. All right, now I'm going to go back up to creating the connection. I'm going to jump back onto the flow aggregator, and let's take a look at the logs. The first one we see was from when the connection, when node port local was not enabled, and subsequent ones are from after enabling it. So that brings me to the end of the demo portion of this video. The last thing I want to mention is the roadmap. So the things that aren't currently supported are testing this with the load balancer and also supporting it in proxy all mode. Thank you so much.
And we have come to the end of this second demo as well. Is there any question, comment, curiosity? All right, so Peter's PR is still in draft stage because of the reasons that we have discussed before, but if you want to take a look or leave early feedback, we will be extremely happy of getting your code reviews on GitHub. We are planning to check in this code for the upcoming Antrea release. So, your reviews are absolutely necessary and more than welcome. And with this, we come to the conclusion of the topics that we had in today's agenda. So, is there anything else that you would like to bring up for today?
Yeah, I just have one comment.
Good.
Especially, it came to me while I was reviewing Andrew's PR today about multiple target support. The first demo that we saw tonight. I mean today, tonight for me. Um, as part of the PR, Andrew had to like take into account support for L7 flow visibility, which is a feature we implemented a while back, which is still alpha in Antrea, where we can support adding mostly HTTP information to the flow records when the traffic is HTTP traffic. I think it's a feature that we don't really test much. I think that with Andrew changes, I don't have a lot of confidence that the feature is gonna keep working after that. I think LAN actually opened an issue a while back because something was broken with the feature. So I kind of like I want to float the idea of possibly removing this feature in Antrea and kind of like deprecating the feature. Um, it can always be added back in the future if there is like a need for it. But I kind of have a feeling that at the moment the feature is not usable and that it may um, be even less usable in the future after we merge all those changes to the flow exporter. So that's just my take. I can open an issue on GitHub as well. So I just wanted to float that idea of possibly deprecating the network visibility feature for now and removing it from the code base to simplify the flow exporter code and kind of like make all those changes that we're working on easier to implement and easier to review.
That makes sense. Let's say that that feature for layer 7 network visibility was mm, it was, to put it in another way, it was something that we checked in and then we left there. We have not really followed up on that feature after checking in the PR. Anton, just for my memory, that's the feature where we seek Suricata's help to get additional information for the flows, right?
Yes,
That
correct.
one. Yeah. I believe that your strategy might be the best one, considering that from an overall Antrea roadmap perspective and also from a user request perspective, we never had, let's say that, we never followed up on that thing. So it might be the case of actually removing it. That's yeah. If you open a GitHub issue, we can discuss together on GitHub what we need to do with that feature. Probably removing it might be, let's say, the safest thing to do at this stage. I don't know if anybody else has a different opinion. Doesn't seem so. So yes, please, Anton, create an issue on GitHub and we'll see if Andrew and Peter can also take care of completely removing this support so that we don't end up having a bit routing code in the repository. All right, thanks. Any other question? Waiting 5 more seconds as usual. And that might be all for today. So thanks a lot for your time and attention. And thanks a lot for the reviews that I know you will be giving to Andrew and Peter. And I wish everybody a great evening, or a good day, or a good evening, or a good afternoon. Thanks for your time again, and talk to you in 2 weeks' time.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye
Bye
bye.
bye.